Welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast, the show by fans for fans of your Milwaukee Brewers. Oh, hello, Brewer fans, and welcome to another Brew Crew Review Podcast. My name's Craig, and with me today is Vincent Scott. Hey, fellas.
Hey,
Craig. Hey, Scotty.
All right. Well, hope everyone had a happy holidays and a happy new year. There's been a few brewer activity in the past couple of weeks that we'll update you guys on. And there's also been some pretty breaking news here in the baseball world, as we'll talk a little bit about the Astros scandal and the punishment that MLB has come down with them on, and so forth. So where do you guys want to start off today?
Well, maybe we should quickly talk about a couple guys that the Brewers saw depart as free agents. Not a surprise, I guess, at this point. After some of our other acquisitions this offseason, but the Brewers did lose pitcher Jimmy Nelson to free agency to the Los Angeles Dodgers, and third baseman Travis Shaw signed with the Toronto Blue Jays. You guys have any thoughts on that?
No. I guess I'm mildly disappointed that Jimmy Nelson left. I think it was like a $1 million deal, like a 1-year deal. But I think with incentives, it could have got up to like $3 million or something like that. I don't know. I mean, obviously we've been rooting for Jimmy Nelson for a while, and we've always hoped that he would be able to complete the comeback. So I would have liked to have matched that and kept him here, but maybe he's again just looking for a new opportunity.
Yeah, Nelson, to your point, was obviously a Brewers draft pick. He was a guy that had come up through our system. He was one of the top pitching prospects in our organization, and then made his debut in 2013. And really took a few years to kind of put it together. Had shown, some decent flashes. But, in 2017, he was having one of the better pitching seasons in recent Brewers memory. And his injury just really seemed to throw him off. I guess I'll take a little different tack than you on this, Scott. I do think that injury has really messed with him. I don't know that he's ever going to be the pitcher that he was when he went down with that kind of freak injury in 2017, but always pulling for him, wishing him all the best in Los Angeles or wherever he ends up, going forward.
Well, yeah, both the guys who signed to the other organizations had really unfortunate, last seasons in particular. Jimmy Nelson finally came back from that injury that he sustained, like since mentioned, 2017. It was just really highly ineffective and didn't really have too much interest in going to the minors, straighten it all out. But I guess the Brewers decided to move on from him, and I guess best of luck to Jimmy going forward. Hopefully not too much luck, since he'll be with the rival Dodgers, who I'm sure will be another playoff caliber team. But Travis Shaw, on the other hand, the Brewers acquired him for Tyler Thornburg, trade from the Red Sox, and he put out some couple of really admirable seasons as a Brewer and really ups his status, but that all came crashing down, unfortunately, last year, where he had one of the worst hitting seasons in Major League Baseball history. So it's hard to kind of come back from that, but you got to wish him the best. He at least moved to an American League team. Wouldn't affect the Brewers too much. But I was sad to see him go a little bit, just because I thought those were the two guys the Brewers were probably really on the fence on offering arbitration to, and decided to move on from them. I was fine with it at the time for the most part. I was more concerned with not offering it to Nelson, because I really want, those type of arms the Brewers don't develop through their systems very often, and thought they had a chance to bounce back, but he may never be the same again. You just never know. So it's too big of a risk. I understand that. With that being said, I expected Stearns, after not offering those guys arbitration, to go out and fill their positions with just as good, if not better, players. But our new third baseman is Jedd Gyorko, so guess not.
Yeah. Well, and kind of similar to Shaw in the sense that he had a really good year a couple of years ago. I think Shaw had 31 home runs a few years ago. Scott, you can have the interns look up how many Gyorko had. But it is interesting. It seems like the Brewers are, at this point at least, going with a platoon at like 3 of the 4 positions on the infield. Has the Smoke and Braun at first base. Hero will be on his own instead at second base, looks like, but Urias and Arcia at shortstop, and then third base, some combination of Gyorko and Eric Sogard and maybe Ryan Healy. I don't know. It's going to be a really interesting mix over at third base unless we go out and get a bigger name, which I don't really foresee at this point. There had been some speculation, mostly amongst fans, of course, talking about how the Brewers could really use a guy like Josh Donaldson, and it sounds like Nolan Arenado's name has been thrown about in trade rumors, not with the Brewers, but with the Rockies potentially offering him up. But it sounds like the Brewers might go with what we have with those 3 guys at the hot corner. What do you guys think?
I think absolutely that's what we're going with. In fact, I think Stern's pretty much said as much, but I guess, God, I'll throw it out to a question to you so you can chime in. If we would have told you at the beginning of this offseason that the Brewers would not re-sign Mike Moustakas at third base, but instead try to enter 2020 with a platoon of Eric Sogard and Jedd Gyorko, would you have been excited?
Maybe if it was like 2017, I'd be mildly excited, but no, I mean, when you really look at it, it kind of made me laugh because obviously, like you had said, Travis Shaw had historically one of the worst seasons ever last year, but he still out OPS Jedd Gyorko last year, who granted only had 92 at-bats, but he was equally abysmal last year, fighting through injuries most of the year. So really kind of hoping that change of scenery helps him a little bit. But I don't know. I mean, I guess I'll say two really, really nice things about him. First of all, this is a great buy low candidate because his stock has never been lower, ever, ever, ever. In fact, not many players' stock is as low as it is. And he has a great nickname, Jerk Store. So that's pretty cool.
That's good. That is cool. Craig, one thing to your point, and I definitely, hear what you're saying. Moustakas, though, started off the year last year, as you guys know, at second base. So the comparison might be, what are we getting now out of the third base position as compared to a couple of months of a very woeful Travis Shaw at third base? And then what do we also get by playing Keston Hiura, for a full season at second base, which he wasn't called up until I think it was late May. Then he went down again for about a month, and then he came back up. So he was, with the team for approximately half of the season last year. So maybe a full season of Hiura mixed with not having Shaw at third, and using this platoon maybe a little bit more effectively than just having one bad starter. Maybe that's the idea that Stearns is putting out there. So I'm wondering if we're going to compare, if we should look at, at bats just from the third base position last year, rather than just looking at Mike Moustakas, who played second for, half the season last year.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, if we were trying to just replicate Shaw's season last year, and as long as we accomplished that, we'd be in good shape. Then not sure if that was the best plan going into off season, but I see what your point is.
Yeah, is Hiura, Hiura at a full season at second, plus hopefully an upgrade at third base over what the position produced over the course of last year. Is that going to be enough to be better than last season, I guess, is my question.
Yeah. And I guess the one person in the third base mix that I actually still have hopes for, and I think is the most talented of the 3 players, is actually Ryan Healy. But again, he's got minor league options, and will probably start the year AAA. But if the vaunted Sogard, Gyorko platoon at their base somehow doesn't work out well, at least we'll have some other options. And also, since we're in the category of saying something nice about our new acquisitions, I will say that for Gyorko and Sogard, they do have something that Stearns and I'm sure Council both value very highly, and that is actually position flexibility, because Jedd Gyorko actually has experience playing even shortstop, so he can play third, short, right, second, and actually same thing with Sogard. So it gives the Brewers, if indeed a better everyday third base option emerges, we do have Gyorko and Sogard who could also fill in for, if something happens where we trade or something to Orlando Arcia, and also Urias is not like ready for the majors for shortstop or something like that. That neither of those guys in the pinch could play shortstop. And the same thing if for whatever reason Castanheira struggles so bad defensively at second baseman, we need coverage there. Those guys could fill in there as well. So
yeah,
it does give us plenty of flexibility.
Yeah, and we lost Hernan Perez to free agency as well. He signed with the Cubs. I think we talked about that on the last podcast, but we did lose Hernan Perez. Didn't have a ton of major league time up last year, but we also lost Tyler Saladino, who in the last week signed with the Korean League. So he's no longer in the organization. So yeah, I mean maybe this mix is going to be even more versatile, even with losing those couple guys too, just because there's more bodies. And we did have another signing that you can talk about here in a minute here, Craig, as well. Yeah,
and if you were to tell me that the Brewers are just replacing Corey Spangenberg and Tyler Saladino's 2019 role, the Brewers with Jedd Gyorko and Eric Sogard, I'd be like, well, that's perfectly fine. But apparently we're expecting more of those guys, but that's okay. We'll hope for the best.
Yep.
Well, you never
hey, Craig,
know,
if we're saying something nice about all the different Brewers acquisitions, can you say something nice about Brett Anderson, please?
Sure. He throws left-handed.
All right.
Which is more sought after than a right-handed pitcher a lot of times.
Okay.
He does get hit when he throws left-handed by the opposing batters a lot and doesn't strike anyone out. But besides that, he does throw left-handed, so that's a plus.
All right. Here's a really good question. Who will have a better 2020, Brett Anderson or Chase Anderson?
Ooh, good one, guys. Good one. I'll go Brett Anderson.
I'm putting my faith in Brett Anderson. But
yeah.
I will go with Chase, and we'll revisit this at the end of the year. But I'm hoping it's Brett because he's a Brewer and Chase isn't. But I don't know. We'll see. In other Brewer news, we also signed someone that could possibly be some more first base depth, and that's Logan Morrison, who we signed to only a minor league deal with an invite to spring training. Obviously, with Justin Smoke on board and Ryan Braun earmarked for some first base at-bats. What do you guys think of, first of all, that signing and whether or not Logan Morrison ever actually plays for the Milwaukee Brewers in 2020?
I mean, it really fits Stearns' MO. He's finding a lot of guys, and I would just charitably say that have upside but can come at a very low cost. So I don't understand fully what the Brewers payroll picture looks like. It seems like right now it's about quantity. Certainly it seems as though Stearns is looking and, trying to find value in a lot of these guys. And, we've seen in other years the market is going to overpay for certain guys at certain positions. And we know that even very, very great players like Anthony Rendon or Josh Donaldson will probably not fully be worth exactly what their contracts are because they have to be so high to, lure them to their new teams. But Stearns has taken the completely opposite tack and has paid next to nothing for a number of these guys. So it'll be really interesting to see if anybody works out. Whether or not he plays as a Brewer, I think he will. I think he will see Logan Morrison at some point next year in a Brewers uniform, maybe like Corey Spangenberg, who came up, later on in the year. Maybe he's that guy. There is a new rule in place, as you guys know, for 2020. We get there's a 26-man roster instead of a 25, and I do think that Stearns' acquisitions this offseason, in terms of versatility and guys with options, I've kind of been geared towards that new rule, and I think we're going to see a lot of movement with that 26 guy on the roster all season long.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. I mean, I don't know that Logan Morrison will have a successful year with us or that he will be a big part of the success or failure of the 2020 team. I don't think he's going to play a big role one way or the other. But, worth a shot. Why not? Take a flyer, see what happens. If you're not investing a lot into him, so whatever. Here's one. Better moral compass, Avisail Garcia or Logan Morrison? Moral compass.
Well, I was going to really quickly compare Morrison to Tyler Austin last year, but all right, Scott. How does Logan Morrison's moral compass come up? Like, does he have a story that I don't know about? Did your interns find something?
I don't know. I just it seems like every time I ever hear anything of him, it's negative. But I can't think of anything off the top of my head, so it can't be that bad. But then again, I didn't even remember a lot of Avisail Garcia's baggage. So,
well, it's because you're interns. But I think Logan Morrison was just in the news today talking about the Astros scandal, which we'll get to later here on the podcast. But he was talking about, the fact that the Astros have been doing that for a number of years. So he, for some reason, made a public statement today. I'm not sure if he was asked a question or if he just kind of put that out there on social media or where that came from. I didn't see too many other current players opine on that issue for obvious reasons, but he decided to, make his opinion known. So I did see that today. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's right. We should probably pivot and talk about that a little bit.
We should, but Greg, you have a thought on Scott's question? No.
I think Craig might be trying to repair a furnace.
No, well, we do prioritize you viewers and listeners, but sometimes household things do come up. Speaking of that, where
I think that's a good segue, guys, to the big news of the day. And sorry not to cut you off, Vince, but were you going somewhere else with that segue?
No, go.
Okay, well, yeah, today, obviously, the big news came down, and obviously fans already knew that this was under an investigation for the past couple of months by MLB, and that is the Houston Astros were handed quite the penalty. Their manager, A.J. Hinch, was suspended for 1 year. Their general manager, Jeff Luthau, was suspended for 1 year. They were fined as an organization the maximum of $5 million. And they also have to forfeit the 2020 and 2021 first and second round draft picks. Also, as a ripple domino effect of that, the owner of the Astros came out and fired Luthau and Hinch today, and I guess what is your guys' take on whether or not you were surprised by the penalties, if you thought they were too harsh or not harsh enough, and all that good stuff. So,
let me just say one thing really quick to put this in context, and it's the harshest penalty imposed by Major League Baseball, except for Pete Rose, banned for life for gambling, and the Black Sox. The 1919 Chicago White Sox, the 8 guys who were suspended for life from baseball for.
So I think that qualifies as big baseball news.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. No, so I just want to put it in context. Historically, it's kind of interesting. So yeah, Scott, do you want to take a first stab here at that? Craig's question.
I guess at the end of the day, like I don't necessarily view it as that harsh of a punishment. I realize that, on the spectrum of just looking at all the different punishments throughout the history of baseball, it's obviously quite high. But I don't think that anybody looks at that and goes, oh, well, that's not too, that's too harsh. That's, to me, I think the punishment fits the crime. I mean, at the end of the day, hey, guess what? They all still get to keep their rings. They all still get to keep the banner. They're still champions. And, obviously I don't know how far back the cheating went that they actually had proof of. But my guess is that it was probably something that's been happening over the course of the last few seasons, including their championship season. So, at the end of the day, the fact that they get to keep their rings, which, again, I'm not arguing for or against, but I think just that means that this punishment is not too harsh by any means.
Yeah, I think it's about right, honestly. It is interesting. And we should also point out, as of this taping, it sounds like there are going to be further ramifications of this investigation. And my guess is that the Red Sox end up having to fire Alex Cora, because it sounds like he was the guy who was sort of behind a lot of this stuff when he was the bench coach in Houston. So I do think there is going to be more of a fallout, from this. And that's kind of what our anonymous source, Tom Carter, had told us in the run up to all this stuff as well. I know that he's been talking to Major League Baseball about where the investigation stands and things as well. But yeah, I did find it interesting that no players were actually suspended or called out really in the report or fined or anything of that nature. And I guess I get that. I think that it's probably due to the fact that, you couldn't really get guys to cooperate with the investigation if it was thought that players were going to be suspended. So I think that is, one concession that Major League Baseball made. The one kind of larger question that looms for me is, sign stealing and I'll call it innocent cheating, like a spitball or certain other facets of the game, have always been a part of baseball. And to me, I guess the question becomes, when does it become so serious that a guy's going to get suspended for life versus when it's something that all teams do and it's considered to be just a competitive thing. And I guess the line that the position I ended up taking on all of this was, when you start using electronics to give yourself an artificial advantage, using a camera planted in center field, I think does cross a line. It's a lot different to me to use a camera with a feed to a video in a room that can quickly be signaled then to a batter than it is to have a guy on the bench who's trying to pick up something from an opposing team's coach or catcher or something. So I think that it's fair game and just sort of part of baseball. If you're trying to steal signs as a player, I think it's a different thing when you use a camera to do it. So that's kind of the conclusion that I at least came to, and I think our anonymous source, Tom Carter, agreed with me too.
Yeah, I think Tom wanted us to just say either his first name or like Tom C or T Carter. Maybe not the full, just for anonymity's sake. But it's what's done is done. We'll get it next time.
Yeah, it's in the report.
Yeah,
but yeah.
I think both you guys and TC made great points. I like Vince's point of the fact that this is something that does go on pretty often in baseball and throughout baseball history, and players kind of know about it, but it's like one of those things where you can try to get away with it by standing on second base or whatnot, and if you're able to successfully figure it out, it's kind of like the other team might even know about it and switch up their signs and whatnot. So it's kind of like a cat and mouse type game, but I don't think it was specifically earmarked as in the rule books completely illegal to do it without using technology. I think that this is the reason why Hinch and weren't like Pete Rose and the Black Sox scandal handed lifetime bans from baseball because of this, which they very well could have, in my opinion, is because of the fact that I think this is just an initial. Well, first of all, because like Vince pointed out, that it is just something that has gone on, and the other teams do it, and they have different ways of doing it. But this is the first one that's got serious evidence that technology was used and implemented in a way that was definitely against the rules, and therefore a pretty harsh punishment had to come down. And I actually thought the punishment pretty much did fit the crime in this matter. I think it's enough to be a deterrent for future teams and GMs and managers to partake in it, or if they see it going down, if it is just players initiating it or something that they're under their watch, so to speak, that they have to put a stop to it, or else their career is going to be in jeopardy, just like Hinch and Luthnow are now. So I think that's a pretty clear signal, and it would have been really tough to suspend individual players. Just I think there were just so many probably that partake in this in one form or another. And so I think hitting the entire organization at the top levels like it did is probably the way to go. And so, yeah, and as far as just stripping them of the World Series ring and the banner and whatnot, I think, history is history. And it's like, if you're not going to hand it to someone else, it can be ignored, but you really just can't like rewrite the history books like that. So I think that's always just kind of something that doesn't hold too much water or whatever. And again, the Astros were a talented team in 2017. And probably were the best team assembled in baseball, in my opinion. But the fact that they did this on top of it is just, it definitely warranted punishment. And I think it's a pretty huge deal. And I think, like Vince pointed out, Alex Cora, who was part of it, and is now the Red Sox manager, is definitely going to have a punishment come down upon him as well. So
Well, and
I
that's
don't
the
think
other interesting. Oh, sorry, Craig. I thought you were done.
I was going to say, I don't think the fallout of this is over. That's by any means.
Yeah, no, and what's interesting is, and again, another very talented team, but Alex Cora took his team the following season and won a World Series as well in Boston. So now, are they going to uncover something that says, okay, Alex Cora, logically probably implemented a very similar system in Boston that he knew and used in Houston. So is that World Championship tainted? And is anyone looking into that? Is baseball looking into that at all right now? And, so those are the types of questions that I think that it would be very tough to unravel and take away championships. To your point, Craig, I don't see any way that you can do that. And then in 2017's case, then you would award a World Championship to the Dodgers who didn't actually win, a Game 7. I think it would be very hard to award a championship to a team that didn't actually win it despite the cheating. So it's kind of, I think that we're kind of right where we should be. The one interesting thing that did come up, and I did have to think about this, and I haven't really formed a full opinion on it yet, is that Major League Baseball decided not to punish Carlos Beltran, who apparently worked very closely with Alex Cora to come up with this system in Houston. When Beltran was a outfielder for Houston, it was his last season in the big leagues, and now, of course, he's going to be the manager of the Mets in 2020. They decided not to punish him because of the actions that when he did that, he was doing so as a player. I did find that one to be kind of interesting. So, I mean, is Major League Baseball going to watch Beltran and the Mets a little bit closer this year, or do you guys think this was a big enough deterrent, to turn off, teams like the Mets or the Red Sox or whoever else from doing this in future years?
Well, I think I'll say this. I mean, obviously, Boston, even though they have Cora over there now, it's not like they would willfully use technology to cheat with an Apple Watch or anything else. I mean, I don't see that as their MO. Oh, wait, they did that. Never mind. Okay, they did that once, but it was just once, But the other thing I guess I wanted to point it out was, obviously I am not an advocate for saying, okay, well, Astros, you lose your championship and we're gonna hand it over to another team that didn't win. I don't like the idea of that. However, I mean, that's pretty much what the NCAA does. I mean, they've gone out of their way to strip teams of championships before. So, I mean, it's not unprecedented. It's just unprecedented within the realm of MLB.
And professional sports generally, because I can't think of another example in any of the big four professional sports where that's taken place.
Right. No, not. I mean, if it did, it was I don't know, 100 years ago or something. But the other thing that I guess I wanted to point out was that I know that players, it's something where I want players to be punished as well with this. And I think that anybody that had uncovered that they were involved one way or the other, or if they were even just a part of that team, let's suspend all of them, but stagger the suspensions. Kind of like if you remember way back, remember the Wisconsin Badgers and that shoebox scandal where they got the same team discount as every other team, whether they were a girls peewee soccer team or a professional team. Everybody, if you came in with a group, you got an automatic discount, and we got suspended for that and had to every player basically had to serve a suspension, but we were able to stagger them out so that obviously we could field the team. Something like that I would have liked to have seen in this case. And then I guess the last thing I wanted to point out is even though I think that this is a pretty fair punishment, what do you think is worse, what the Astros did or what the Cardinals did with hacking into the Astros computers and finding, obviously information with their, I mean, who knows what they found? I mean, but basically any kind of information about their organization or any kind of strategy that it could be. I mean, they had to have gotten a boatload of information. So which is worse?
Well, according to federal law, what the Cardinals did is worse because there's a guy serving a jail sentence in federal prison for that. Because, I mean, when you break into a company's, information or database, whether it's in the corporate world or in baseball, it's a major crime, and it's a crime for a variety of reasons. Obviously, you can find out about strategy for an opposing team in this case, or a company in in the corporate world, or even stuff like HIPAA violations are occurring. You've got access to guys' medical files. I mean, it's pretty crazy when you think about how that was allowed by the Cardinals. And I'm surprised that Major League Baseball actually didn't punish the Cardinals a little bit more for what they did. But that's a good comparison, Scotty. I had kind of forgotten about that happening a few years ago.
So just to compare, the Astros lose their top 4 picks, basically, or they lose 4 top picks, I should say. The Cardinals lost their top 2 picks of that year, and they were fined $2 million, which was the highest amount ever for an organization. But who cares? Like $2 million, I don't care about that at all. If I'm an organization, like, fine, great. Really, the Astros were basically punished twice as hard, in my opinion, as the Cardinals, which doesn't necessarily mean a lot to me. Like, it's just kind of crazy. I thought the Cardinals should have been definitely hit a lot harder than they were. I think their excuse was they were doing the baseball god's will, whatever that is. So I don't know. You can't argue with Cardinals.
I don't disagree with that assessment, Scott, but I will say that I kind of feel that what the Astros did from a baseball perspective, like the on-field perspective, was much worse because it was indirect. So, I mean, I think that's the main reason for the punishment.
I think it just kind of depends on what the Cardinals got with respect to the Astros. I mean, if they had like their draft board or like strategies about how they work with, different people or different series, or how they valued their prospects, or any kind of insider info that they had. I mean, it's such a vast amount of information.
Would it be? Yeah, no, that's a good point. Would it be different if, like, the Cardinal, say that somebody hit? You guys remember Jason Grimsley, pitcher in the '90s, who snuck through the ceiling tiles to go retrieve a bat from the umpire's locker room that had been taken from the field from Albert Bell.
Yep.
And they were looking for cork, and they put the bat in the locker room. So Grimsley, climbs through the ceiling to go and get to steal the bat in the middle of the game out of the umpire's room. And end up finding that the bat had been switched out because he accidentally replaced it with a Paul Sorrento bat, which wasn't maybe the brightest move, but whatever.
Oops.
And I'm wondering, like, hypothetically, what if teams planted a listening device in the opposing team's locker room to get strategy or something, so that's an electronic thing. Or what if somebody, like, physically climbed through the ceiling like Grimsley did and listened ahead of time? Like, there's all sorts of scenarios that could play out. I don't know how Major League Baseball would begin to sort out, what constitutes something serious or what constitutes something that's more in line with the traditions in the game of, like, spitballs or other sandpaper underneath a glove, or, ways that it's viewed as more innocent cheating versus more heinous cheating, like what the Astros did, or probably what the Cardinals did as well. Is it the electronic component that makes this different? Is that the big difference here? Because Grimsley didn't even get suspended for what he did at all. So I find it to be kind of interesting just how Major League Baseball determines what's serious and what isn't.
Well, I think the crazy thing about all this is that I think this is like the first main incident going into the future. I mean, technology is going to keep advancing. There's going to be ways to possibly do this even more efficiently or undetectedly, so to speak, in the future. And I think MLB wants to cut out any notion of even attempting that because of the hammer they can bring down as punishment. So I think that's wise to do that, especially, and Scott, you live out in Vegas, and there's even talk about possible baseball relocation in Vegas in the future, and I think there's some validity to that. Okay, calm down there, buddy. No,
It's gonna be right by the
Brewers fan.
Right by the Rio. You heard it here first.
Getting back to Pete Rose, he's a number one prime example why baseball is always trying to distance themselves from the gambling community, especially when players or managers are involved. And I think that's going to continue to be the case in the future. And if there's that technology element that can help change the outcome of a baseball game, and there's going to be more gambling in the future, especially on a federal level, it's much more deregulated as it used to be, gambling overall, and it's going to be more in the future. So there's going to be a lot more, money being put down on Major League Baseball games going forward. There's just no doubt about that. Obviously, with the internet, with the deregulation of the industry, and with baseball possibly moving to Vegas, all those things, baseball. So I think from a technology cheating standpoint, baseball had to come down hard on this, and I think it's hard enough, but like Scott pointed out, it could have been even harsher and maybe should have been even harsher, but I think this is a pretty good initial start as far as deterrent for future shenanigans, so to speak.
Yeah, and it should be pointed out, the monetary fine, I think you mentioned it, Craig, $5 million was levied against the Astros. It doesn't sound like a ton, because it's, these major league teams are paying so much money in salaries and whatnot, but it should be pointed out that is the maximum allowable fine under the current setup in Major League Baseball that it has with the different clubs. So it's not like they chose that number randomly. It was literally the top 100 percentile of available options for them to fine the Astros. So you may see that in the future. If this isn't effective and it keeps going up, the teams might end up raising that, with clubs and saying, all right, we're going to be able to, bill a franchise $100 million. I don't know. I'm just making up numbers, but it should be pointed out that this was the maximum allowable fine that was levied against Houston today as well.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's something they can negotiate in the next collective bargaining, or if that's even part of that to.
No, it's not. It's not CBA because it's not with the players. It's the agreement that a franchise has with Major League Baseball. So, they'll. That's what I figured. An owner will, have those constraints to work under Major League Baseball rules. So the other owners would have to vote on that. I don't know what percentage it is that the owners would have to approve a raise. I think it's 75%, but I could be wrong on that. So
and the owners don't like fining themselves, so I'm sure that number won't go too much.
Right. Who does? So yeah, it would make some sense that wouldn't change unless they want to do it as a PR thing. And for most owners that run clean teams, and I don't think that Jim Crane, the Astros owner, was necessarily himself terribly guilty in this. It sounds like he was very cooperative with Major League Baseball and kind of taken aback. And then he did fire his GM and his manager today, and took that step apparently on his own. So more owners may be in favor of that going forward than you might expect. But yeah, you're right. It's the fine and the number is determined between the owners in Major League Baseball. So.
And I was initially like, well, good for the owner of the Astros, Jim Crane, for doing the firing. But then after that sunk in a little bit later, I was like, what other choice did he really have? I mean, are you really going to let these guys just sit on the sideline or organization for a full year and then bring them back?
Right.
2021.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the optics would just be terrible, and the fans. And I think that there was really a no-brainer, so to speak. And so I initially was giving them a lot of credit for doing that, but the more I thought about it, I was like, well, there's really nothing else he could have done. So,
well, it worked out.
Which is why I tend to think that Alex Cora is going to get fired here this week then as well, because the Red Sox are going to be operating under the same constraint. And if Cora is given a year, I was talking to an Astros fan today. It was interesting. Like if Hinch would have been suspended even half a season, you're still talking about, two managers in the same year on a good team. Like, it just doesn't seem to make a ton of sense pragmatically that you'd want any sort of cloud or this for your organization. And I think it would really negatively affect the players, to have a new manager coming at the All-Star break, if you would just suspended him for a half year. So I don't know how long Major League Baseball is looking at suspending Alex Cora for, but I think that if it's anything over 10 games, which I'm sure it will be, I tend to think that the same exact thing is going to happen in Boston that we saw today in Houston.
There's even talk that Cora could suspended for more than a year based off of how much he's actually implicated in this. Right.
Exactly.
Well, guys, we only got about 40 seconds here. But I did want to point out that, I mean, it's not apples to apples, but, Sean Payton, obviously, of the Saints after the whole Bounty scandal, he was suspended for a full year, and he came back, and it worked out really well for that organization. So you never know, I guess, but
different sports though.
Yeah. Just throwing it out there. It's the closest comparison I have. But since we only have a few seconds, tell all your friends and have people listen to this podcast. We've had a lot of new people listening now. Really appreciate it. Get those 5 stars in at Brew Crew Review 1 on Twitter. Hang out, stay classy.
Go Brewers.
Go Brewers.
Dun, 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 dun.